Well, remember, my name is Riaz, and we are actually doing the introduction to Python. And yesterday, we actually looked at some examples of using Python to do calculations. We looked at variables, we looked at input, and we looked at processing, and we looked at output, etc. Just remember that we are going to go back to uh, Python because I actually needed to show you guys some stuff. Right, yesterday we were looking at this, and this, by the way, which I did not mention yesterday, is called your interactive shell. This is your interactive shell. Now, this is the amazing thing about this, is that this is basically your output screen for Python, because if I was actually writing a complete Python program, this is what I would do. Now, remember, I want you to look at these options over here. We've got file, we've got edit, we've got shell, we've got debug, we've got options, windows, help. But this is not actually the interface that we use to create our program. Yesterday, I used this interactive screen just to show you how we would do certain things, right? So this is what we're going to do. The first thing that you're actually going to do is this over here. When you open up Python, you're going to come to your interactive screen, and then you're going to go to file, and you're going to go to new file. Now, when you come to new file, you're actually going to see this here. This is actually called your edit screen. And these are the two things you will use in conjunction with each other, because basically this is the part, we see it here untitled. This is the part that is actually where you're going to type your code, and your interactive screen is where you're going to see your output. Now, before you actually run anything in Python, right? So just remember, it's going to be file, right? You're going to go to file, and you're going to go to new file. Now, before you actually run anything, now you'll notice, look at these options over here. We've got file, we've got edit, format, and we've got run. That is the important thing. Whenever we are executing any computer program, we actually say we are running it. Now, before we actually do any code, now notice, don't worry about this over here. This is something that I was doing earlier. Before we actually do anything, the first thing we're going to do is save. We're going to go to file, we're going to go to save as. Now, generally, it would go and save it in the normal Python folder, but you go and create a folder of your own, and you go and save it in there. Now, just to show you, I'm just going to call this over here. Let's just call it lesson 2, or lesson anyway, right? And I'm going to type in code over here, and this is the part where we're going to be seeing our output, right? So remember yesterday, if we looked at something, if I said print Diana, right? If I press enter, obviously it's going to give me space to type in other code. There's nothing here yet. There's nothing here yet. If you look at this part here, there's nothing here yet. Now, if I go to run and run module, and that's how you'd run it, each time you make a change to your edit, it's going to ask you to save your source. This is called your source code, right? So just click OK. It will save it, right? Computer's a little bit slow today. And you'll notice over here, it actually ran it. So each time you run the program over here, each time you run from your edit screen over here, you will see it says restart, right? And obviously it's going to run it for you. So that is one of the things that we need to actually look at. So all our programs you're going to be typing, we're not going to be actually, this is your interactive screen, remember that? And this is your edit screen. Edit screen, your interactive screen. We're going to do our coding in our edit screen, and we are going to, when we run it, it will display it in our interactive screen. So we've got quite a bit to do today, so let's get started. Just going to come here and just remove this over here because we've got quite a bit of stuff to do. Right, first things first. Let's go. Just going to increase this a little. Right. Now, I want you to look at this over here. Today, we're going to be Python comments, naming conventions, data types, and casting. Right, in Python, we have comments. Now, what exactly are comments? Comments can appear almost anywhere in your code, and it's always a good idea to comment your code. Simply because, firstly, months later, you might be looking at your computer program and you might wonder, okay, what exactly am I doing in this line of code? And if you actually have a comment over there, you'll see that that comment will basically give you an idea as to what's happening. More importantly, in industry, IT people, programmers hardly ever stay in the same job for a long period of time because they're always looking to move up. So obviously, if they did a computer program and they moved on, the next person that takes over the job can actually read their comments and understand what they are doing at each step of the program, because programmers, we all program in many different ways. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is this here, that a comment, you have two types of comment, right? You have single line comments. Now, a comment begins with a hash. A comment begins with a hash. So let's go over here and let's go and do this over here. And after the hash, it's two spaces, and we'll type in this is a comment. Now, what happens with comments is this here. Python actually sees it, but as soon as it sees the hash, it ignores that line. So it doesn't execute it, right? So you'll notice that there. Now, if I had to come here and say X is assigned 5, or let's assume I said 16, I can come in the same line, put a hash and say this is an age. So when I look at this line here, I can say, okay, fine, reading this comment, that is an age. Okay, right? So that is one type. These are single line comments, right? Coming back to this here, these are single line comments. Single line comments, right? We also have double line comments. Now, or multi-line comments. Now, what exactly does that mean? Let's assume I needed to actually say quite a bit of stuff before my program, somewhere in the program. I'm actually doing a segment of code. I can go and say hash this initializes a variable. And then if I need another line of comment to the value of, and if I have another line of comment, say 25. So each time I actually have a new line, I can actually go put single hashes in each place and do it that way. That's one way of doing a multi-line comment. Now remember, multi-line, multiple lines, or this is a better way of doing it. You actually use 3 single quotes for 3 double quotes. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I could go, this is a multi-line comment. And to close it off, now notice it's in green. Our comments will always be in orange, right? And I will close it off. I started off with 3 single quotes. I can close it off with 3 single quotes. And that would be a multi-line comment, right? So we have single line comments. It could appear at the top, or it could appear in line with your code. So for each line of code, you could actually go and put in a comment stating what that line of code is actually doing, or you could have multi-line comments, right, where you have quite a bit to actually say. Now, coming back to this over here, yesterday we used variables. Now, looking at this over here, all right, I'm just going to remove this now. Okay, I said X is assigned 16. Now I'm saying X is assigned 16. I want to, I'm saying X represents an age. But if I just look at the variable X, the variable X doesn't really tell me anything. The name doesn't tell me anything. In fact, if you look at it, right, when we were using variables, whenever you're using variables, it's always useful. It's always useful to have a meaningful variable. So like I was saying just now, if we had X equals 16, if you look at my comment here, it's actually meaningless because we don't know what on earth X refers to. It could be somebody's age, it could be their score that they got in a particular test, etc. But if you look at this part here, I've got age is assigned 16. Now that is meaningful because the second one actually tells us that, you know what, the variable is named age, and it obviously represents the age. So whatever type of data is going to be stored in a variable, try to name that variable that will reflect that data. So if I was storing somebody's salary, what kind of variable would I use? I would call it salary is assigned maybe 456.89. Okay, so now remember, this is extremely important, right? So if I was going to have somebody's name, if I was studying somebody's name, like I'm saying over here, right, I will call it name. Now, there are certain rules and conventions that you use when naming variables. Most importantly, you cannot have spaces in it. You cannot have spaces in it. For example, if I come in here, and I'll show you this now, right? If I say my salary, and if I come here and say print my salary, and if I run this, it's going to give me an invalid syntax error. Let's come here and see what it says. Oh, it didn't even run. Why? Look at this here. My salary, it has a space. So your variable cannot have spaces in it. Second, well, thirdly over here, a variable cannot begin with a digit. So if I had a invalid syntax because it begins with a number, a digit. Okay, now when you're looking at a variable, right? When you're looking at a variable, firstly, a variable can consist of letters of the alphabet. Now check this out. I could come over here and say 234, salary 234, and that would be acceptable, salary 234. So your variable name must always be lowercase, all small letters. It could have digits in it. It cannot begin with a digit. Now, if I go and run this, can you see that there? It worked because it started with a letter. So your variable must always start with a letter, or it could start with an underscore. Now, when I was looking at this just now, right, let's assume I go and say my underscore name. Now, you can have an underscore joining separate words that make up your variable, because trust me, it is a hell of a lot easier to, well, that is not very easy to read, but that is very easy to read. So if we could come over here and go, is, and I'm going to say assigned, and go over here and say Bruce, right? That is acceptable. So your variable name must start with a letter. It must be all lowercase, so this is not acceptable. See this here? That is not acceptable. All lowercase, it cannot begin with a number, it can have digits in it, and you can join them with underscores. Now let's look at some of these variables over here. Look at the first variable there. This variable over here. Oh, okay. Right. If I, well, we already did that. Right. So let's just come here. And we already discussed that in the sense that your variable cannot start with a digit. It must be all lowercase. It must start with a letter, and it can have underscores. Now, which brings me to something we were doing yesterday. Yesterday, we were looking at variables. We said X is assigned 10, Y is assigned 78, and Z is assigned X plus Y, and we said print Z. Okay, let's just go and make this here 78.66. Oh, 0.66 and run that. What happens here? It added the 10, it added the 78.66, it gave us 88.66, it stored it in Z, and it displayed it. Which brings us to something that is extremely important, because when you are designing software, when you are writing programs, you need to understand what type of data is stored in which variables. So let's look at variable data types. Every variable that you use has a data type. Every variable, right? Now, when we assign a value to a variable, for example, x is assigned 10, 10 is an integer. As soon as we assign a value to a variable, Python automatically identifies what type of variable that will be. 10 is an integer, it's a whole number. So x will be of type integer, right? Let's look at this over here. Example, her age equals 16, or is assigned 16. Sorry. Python will look at the 16. Python will look at the 16 here, and it will determine that this is an integer, right? And it will decide that her age will be of type integer. Let's look at it in Python, right? We can also use a type function. We'll come to that just now, right? So let's go do that. We've got her age is assigned 16, right? Well, we don't know what type this is, right? Python knows what type it is. Now, if we need to determine the type of data that is stored in a particular variable, we can actually use something called a type function. Look at this here. Print, and inside, type is a special command, special function, and I'm going to go with her underscore age. So what are we doing over here? I want to print the type of variable that her age is going to be storing. So if I come here, run this, and what does it say here, guys? Don't worry about the class. This is the data type, int. That is the data type. Okay? That there is the data type. Now, looking at other examples, and this is weird. Like, for example, if I come here and say x is assigned 10, and come here and say print type x, right? What is it going to give me? It's going to give me int. Now, I want you to watch what happens here. If I come here and say x is assigned 99.32, 99.32 is not an integer. So if I come and look at that there, I want you to look at this now. When this print statement is executed, it's going to display class int. When this one is displayed, let's look at it. Check it out, guys. The first time x was of type int, the second time it's of type float. And what exactly is float? Floats are basically real numbers. Float are decimal numbers. They're actually a combination of integers and decimal numbers, right? So in Python, if we went and put over there, which we just did now, print type of her age, the output would be class int. That means int is the data type of the variable her age. So these are some of the data types that we're going to be using. Trust me, there are many, many data types, but these are the common ones that we're going to be using this year. Firstly, we have string. Now, before we even look at this over here, I want you to think about something, that whenever you are writing a program, whenever you are writing code, whenever you are coding a solution to a problem, you got to ask yourself, okay, I have to read in this person's age. My variable must be of what data type? Age. You're not going to have, nobody ever says my age is 16.35 years old. No, right? You are going to basically say, okay, age, integer. If I wanted to store somebody's name, I need to determine, okay, what type of data what type of variable is this going to be? If I'm going to be storing the amount of fees paid in a sports club, I need to know what type of data it's going to be. So if you look at the first one over here, we have string. I've typed out the full word string over here, but in Python, it's actually str. Now, what does str store? A variable of type str, it stores letters, digits, special characters. It can basically store anything. So here, look at these examples over here. I've got S is assigned ABC. ABC is in quotes. Anytime you take anything in quotes and assign it to a variable, that variable automatically becomes string. Look at the second one over here. I have S is assigned 1 hash at V. I've got digits, I've got special characters, and I've got a letter of the alphabet. It could be anything as long as it is within single quotes. Right. Then we look at the second data type, which is int. Now, if you're looking at int, which is of type integer, these are basically positive and negative whole numbers, as well as the number 0. So look at this example. N is assigned 5. 5 is a positive whole number. Therefore, n will be of type int. Over here, negative 99 is it's a whole number, although it's negative. So n will be of type int, because remember, int can store positive or negative numbers. Then we have real, or actually float, which is of type real. It's like our normal real number system in mathematics. And that's basically all numbers, all decimal numbers. There is another data type called complex numbers, but we're not going to be looking at that now. So all decimal numbers. Look at this over here. R is assigned 3.78. R is assigned negative 731. Now remember, this is the important thing. An integer variable cannot store, well, actually it can. It's called typecasting. We'll look at that now. But basically, an integer variable cannot store a real value, a float. Okay, we have this really strange data type over here called Boolean, bool, and basically it stores a value, basically the actual literal value true or the value false, right? So I want you to look at this over here now, right? I'm just going to get rid of that, and I'm going to come over here and say flag is assigned true. And you actually, this true and false. Now let's look at this over here. If I come here and say print type of flag and run that, can you see that there? It tells you it is of type Boolean. Now, generally, Boolean is used to determine whether something is true, something is false, whether something happened, something didn't happen, etc. All right, moving on. Now, when you look at the different things that we can actually do with the different types of variables, so just remember, let's just recap this, right? When we declare a variable, and we assign a value to it, determining based on what the type of data that is being stored in that variable, Python will determine what type of data that variable is going to be, right? That is important. Secondly, if I was using variables, my variables should be meaningful. Remember, a variable can only start with a letter or an underscore. It cannot start with a digit, but it can contain digits. And if we go 4, 5, 6, 34, so, right? So name will be of type str. My salary will be of type float, because that's a float, right? And if I said my score is assigned 12, my score will be of type integer. So we're looking at the different data types over here. Now, when we talk about casting, and this is really, really interesting. When we look at casting, right? When we look at casting, we are basically taking the value of the variable of one data type and converting it into another. So that basically means the actual data type of the variable changes, which I showed you earlier, where I assigned an integer to it, and it was of int, class int, and then I added a float number to it, it made it float. But that is one way of doing it. Let's look at a few ways of actually casting your variables from one data type to another, right? So firstly, int to float. Now let's look at this over here. We've got b is assigned 25. So b 25 is a positive whole number. So b will be of type int. Look at the next line. I've got a b is assigned float b. Now, basically, how do you cast from one data type to another? You use the keywords float or str or int and whatever you're trying to cast inside. So if you look at this, we've got over here, b is assigned 25. That's a whole number. B is assigned float b. So b now becomes 25.0. Let's go and look at that. So we're going to say b is assigned 25. B is assigned float b. And I'm going to come here and say print type of b. So let's look at this again. This is a whole number. So b is assigned 25. B is int. Over here, I'm converting it to float. I'm converting that integer to float. Now remember, it's just 25 here, right? Let's see what happens over here. Oh, let's just do this as well, since we did that. Let's go and print the value of b as well. Look at it. From 25, it became 25.0, which is what we had over here, right? And if you look at the data type, it converted it to float. So the first type of casting is from an integer to a float, from an integer to a real number. Going backwards now, we've got the float to int. Now let's see what's happening here, because this is a little bit different and it actually loses some accuracy. We've got n is assigned 89.67. Now, if I had to round off 89.67, I'm going to end up with, because this is greater than 5 or greater, this should become 90. I've got n is assigned 89.67. I've got n is assigned int n. So that means I'm taking this and converting it to an integer. N now becomes 89. The 0.67 is just dropped. So let's go look at that. I'm just going to use b as well over here, 89.67. And we can come here and go with int. So once again, 89.67 is b. B is assigned int. I'm converting 89.67 to an integer. And let's go and see what our data types. Notice this here, guys. Look at that there. The 0.67 was dropped. And your data type is of type int. It converted to an integer. This is very interesting. And guys, we are actually going to be spending quite a few days only dealing with strings, because it's a fascinating data type. And there's lots and lots of interesting questions we can actually do with regards to that. Now, how do we know that something is of type string? It will appear within quotes. Oh, by the way, the one thing I did not tell you was this, right? Let's just come over here. If I said, right, if my name is assigned Clark, notice I'm using single quotes, right? I can, guys, use double quotes. So I can either use single quotes or double quotes. It's not going to make a difference because it works just the same. Right, don't worry about it. 89 and class int. Can you see the clock there? So whether you use single quotes or double quotes, it's just the same. Excuse me. So if we look at this, we've got S is assigned 27 and 27 is within quotes. That means S is of type str, right? And then we've S is assigned int S. It's going to take that 27 because they're all digits and it's going to convert it to an integer. Now, if it converts it into an integer successfully, that means we can add or subtract to it. That's right. So I'm just going to take all of this out for now. Just going to show you this over here. S is assigned 27, and this is really, really interesting. Guys, if I come here and say print S, it's going to print 27 as a string. Can you see that? It's going to print 27 as a string. Now, if I come here and say S is assigned S plus, if I say 3, now you would normally think, hey, wait a minute, 27, S is 27 plus 3, that should give me 30. Let's see what happens. It's going to make this a comment. What is it giving us? 273. So what exactly did it do to the 2, 7, and the 3? What exactly does a plus sign do to a string when you add two strings together? Guys, it actually joins strings. So your plus sign actually joins strings. Now I want you to look at this over here. S is assigned S plus 3. 2, 7 joined to 3 will give us 273. Now, here's the thing. If I said this, if I said, say, T is assigned int S, now what data type will T be? S is of type string, right? S is of type string. T, and I'm converting it to an integer, so T will become an integer. So if I come here and say T is assigned T plus 3, what should that give me? Now, I want you to, guys, I want you to think about this. S was 27, not 27, guys, because it's within quotes, we will call it 27. So S is assigned 27. Here, I'm joining 27 to 3 to give me 273. Here, I am taking the 273 and converting it to an integer. So now it will no longer be 273, it will be 273. And I'm going to come here and 273 plus 3 should give me 276. So let's come here and say print T, and let's see what happens. Look at it. It was 273. At that point, it was 273. We converted to an integer, it became 273, and 273 plus 3 is 276, which is what we have here, which brings us back here. So remember, If you try to convert a string to an integer, oh, let's put it this way. I want you to look at this here. 27A. 27A. I'm just making those comments, guys. Right, guys, can you tell me what's going to happen over here? It's not 27A, it's 27A. We're going to come here. This is 27A plus 3, which is also a string. It's going to say 27A. Come on. What will S be? Look at it. 27A3. It becomes 27A3. Now, if we come back here and try to execute that, the question is this: can 27A3 be converted into a number? I mean, is a digit? Let's try that. It should give us an error. There we go. Invalid literal for int. Can you see this here? It says 27A3. So when you are trying to convert a string to an int, that string must only be digits. It must only be digits, and obviously it must not be a decimal. Well, it could be a decimal number, right? So remember, when you're converting from string to int, you cannot have digits in your string. String to float, exact same thing, right? Take the A out from here, and we're going with float there. So let's get through this again. S is assigned 27, not 27. Over here, S becomes what? 27 joined. The plus means joined to 3. It becomes 273. Float will convert 273 to 273.0. Remember that. Plus 3, it'll give us 276.0. The 0.0 will be there because it's of type float. Check it out, guys. 276.0. Once again, when you are converting from string to int or string to float, your string can only be digits. It cannot be letters of the alphabet or any other special characters. We also have this over here. Look at this. We've got over here int to string. So we want to take an integer and make it a string. Now let me just let's just look at something over here. Right? We'll take all of that out for now. And if I said age is assigned 16, I'm asking myself, okay, in 10 years' time, right? In 10 years' time, what would age be? It would be age is assigned age plus 16. Oh, sorry, 10. In 10 years' time, we will add 10 to it. So age is assigned 16. Age is assigned 16. Age is assigned age. Plus 10, age will become 26. Now, here's the thing. I need to display a message. So I'm just going to call it MSG for message is assigned. And I'm going to come do this over here. My age will then be, and I'm going to come over here and say plus age. And I'm going to come over here and say print MSG. So let's examine these 4 lines of code. In the first line, we've got age is assigned 16. 16 is an integer. It's a whole number, so age is going to be a type integer. In the next line, I'm increasing the age by 10. So age from 16 will become 26. In the next line, I want to have a message to display. So I've got over there message is assigned. My age will then be, let's just leave a space there, colon there, right, to make it look. So it should actually display what? My age will then be 26. Let's go and try it out. Check it out. Oh, by the way, the fancy word for joining strings is called concatenate, guys. So check this out. What does it say over here? This is where the error, it came up, it came on the error on that line, and it can only concatenate string to string, not int. So what if I did this, guys? What if I came here and cast this into a string? Well, that work. That means now age at this point is no longer a number. It's a string. And remember over here, it says it can only join string to string. Can you see this, guys? So anytime I actually want to display or join a string and an integer, I can take that integer, convert it to a string, take that integer, convert it to a string, and it will make it a string and it will allow me to join. So remember that. It's a pretty useful casting method from int to string or float to string. So that way you can actually create text messages or string messages that will always work. Okay, so look at this over here now. N is assigned 31. 31 is an integer. Therefore, N will be of type int. In the next line, I am casting that 31 to str, to string. So N now will become a string. So N now becomes, sorry, 31. So if you look at this over here, that's exactly what we were doing here. Over here, it was 26. This is important, right? Age at the moment is 26, but when I say str age, it makes it 26. That's why it was able to join these two strings and give me a very user-friendly message saying my age will then be 26. Similar story with float, right? Very, very similar story with float. We will come and look at this just now, or let's look at it now. In the first line, f is assigned 31.709. 31 point, as soon as you have a decimal number, it's float. So f in the first line, f is of type float. In the very next line, I am casting that float to a string. So f now will become not 31.709, it will become 31.709, which is a string. Now, when would I use something like this here? When would I use something like that there? If I went and said salary is assigned 1,000. Remember, it's not 1,000. Well, actually, what data type will salary be? It will not be float, it will be int, because this is, right? So I can just put 0.0 there to make it float, right? So salary is of type float. Now, I want to, well, we're going to work with the program just now with regards to this over here. So I want to display and say my salary is. So MSG is assigned my salary is colon. And once again, if I come here and say salary and print MSG, it's going to give me an error because once again, it can only concatenate or join string to string. So how do I convert this, guys? How would I convert salary to a string? str. There we go. My salary is 1,000, but it doesn't really look very, very user friendly because normally salary has an R in front of it or something. It's not so. So look at this over here, guys. I've got my salary is colon, and then it put the salary there. So before we actually display the salary over here, I can come here and put an R. Oh, and put an R. So now what is it going to join? It's going to join my salary is, and it's got an R there, and then it's going to display convert your salary to a string, and it's going to join all of that and store it in MSG, and then we're going to display. Check it out, guys. It has an R in front of it. Doesn't look very good, but just remember, you can play around with it to make it look as whichever way you want. Okay, so we got float to string, right? And that is the end of that presentation, but it's not the end of our lesson because here's a question for you. You earn a salary. You earn a salary. You want to store that salary in a variable. Here's a scenario. So you store your salary. You earn a salary. You are getting an increase. Now remember, an increase means if you are earning 5,000 rands now, if you're getting an increase, you're going to end up with more, right? So let's just type this question out so that you guys can follow it clearly. Right. You earn a salary of 5,000 rands. That's one. Secondly, you receive an increase of 17.34%. Determine and output your new salary. Now, remember yesterday I was talking about input processing and output. That's basically our input. That's actually standard 17.34, and we need a new salary. Now, obviously, because it's an increase, it means that the salary is going to be more. Now, remember yesterday I actually worked out that 15% VAT, etc. So let's work out the determinant output. The increase amount and B, your new salary. So we need to work out two things. We need to work out your increase amount, which is 17.34%. 17.34% of what? Of 5,000. So I need to store my salary here. So I'm going to do not call it my salary right now. I'm just going to come here and say 5,000. So that's the first part, guys. I stored there. I've used a variable called salary, and I stored my salary of 5,000. Now I want to work out what the increase amount is. The increase amount is 17.34% of salary. It's 17.34% of salary. I could just use 5,000, but you'll see why just now. So I'm going to come over here and call that increase amount is assigned. How do we write any number as a percentage? Any number written as a percentage is that number divided by 100. So how would I write 17.34%? I'm basically going to come here. It's going to be 17.34 divided by 100, and that is actually a percent. Now that's 17.34%. Sorry, excuse me. That's 17.34% of what? Of my salary, yes or no? And tell me, yesterday we spoke about the BODMAS rule. Of is what mathematical operation? It's times. Times what? Salary. So that's my increase amount. So my salary is 5,000. My increase amount, I'm calculating it's 17.34% of my salary. So, sorry, excuse me, please. So that's my increase amount. What would my new salary be? How would I calculate my new salary? My new salary will be my original salary plus sure. No, it doesn't. Increase amount. So let's look at it. This is my salary, my original salary. To calculate the increase amount, it's 17.34% of 100 of my original salary. My new salary will be my salary plus the increase amount. So we're going to come here and print now. Well, actually, we're going to, let's go and print. We're going to come over here and say print. We need to print the increase amount, yes or no? So I'm going to now, guys, this is a little bit complex, but follow as best as you can, and I'll try to explain it. Your increase amount is, I'm just putting the R there. Now remember, increase amount is going to be of type float. So I want to join it to a string. To join a float variable to a string, that float variable must become a string variable. Okay, so let's go and see if that works for now. So just remember this now. My salary was 5,000. This is my increase amount, which I calculated. My new salary would be my original salary plus my increase amount. Now I'm displaying over here what the increase amount is because that's what I put in the question. Just determine and output your increase amount. This increase amount colon R, that's just a standard string, and increase amount is float. And I want to join it to a string, so I must convert it to a string. And if I run this, my increase amount is 867. Just going to come here just to make it a hell of a lot more user-friendly and put over there old salary colon R. Once again, I want to display my salary. My salary is of type, let's go and put a 0 there. All right, my salary is of type float. I can only join a string to a string. Remember that I can only join a string to a string. So convert salary to a string. So if we run this now, my old salary was 5,000. My increase amount is 867. So guys, what will my new salary, what should my new salary be? 5,000 plus 867 should be 5,867, which is my new salary. So let's come here and go with print new salary of type, and remember, my new salary variable is of type float. Remember, you cannot join a float to a string. You can only join a string to a string. So we go and convert those to my new salary as well to string. So just remember, what did I say? My original salary, my old salary was 5,000. My increase amount is 867. My new amount, my new salary should be 5,867. There we go. So we just answered the question. But more importantly, I want you to look at the way the output is. Remember, guys, just going and displaying 5,867, 5,867, it means nothing because it's just numbers. But when we actually put a message in front of it, it makes it much more meaningful. Remember that one of the things that you have to take into account is this over here, that when you design programs, when you write programs, they have to be user-friendly. That means the person that's using the program must understand what they're supposed to do. They're not going to sit over there and click here and click there and try to determine, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing? Or what should I do? Or whatever it is. So the most important thing is this, right? Now you've seen this over here, and I've saved that over there, right? I'm just going to go back and save this over here as salary, right? I'm going to come here. Just going to show you something. Edit where. Oh, there's okay. I want you to look at this over here. If I just come here and say print 5,000, it's just printing 5,000. 5,000 is meaningless. But if I come over here and say pay Diana. Now remember, once again, this is going to give me an error because 5,000 is an integer. Yes or no? Check it out. It's going to give me an error. See, it can only conjoin string to string, not int. Guys, how do we make the 5,000? And a string, we put str in front of it and run it. Pay Diana 5,000 rands. Now, notice from the first one, 5,000 was meaningless. When we actually display a message saying what that 5,000 is, it makes it much more meaningful. So just remember, your variables, when you are using variables, they need to be meaningful. So if you look at this program here, salary, pretty straightforward. It means, hey, you know what, this variable is going to be storing salary. Increase amount, okay, this is the amount of increase we're going to get. And my new salary, obviously, this will include the new salary. One of the things we are going to be continuing with tomorrow, we can actually be expanding on this program, is with regards to different types of deductions, etc. I want to thank all of you for attending this afternoon, and I will see all of you guys tomorrow at 2. Please, I hope you guys have downloaded Python and you've actually tried it out. The one thing I forgot to tell you is that 3.9.1 works with Windows 8 and above, not less than that. So please just make sure that you get that. All right. Thank you once again, guys. Vianney, thank you so much. And we can end the session today. Thank you.